Let's look at the basic fundamentals of UV mapping. So I have my workspace set to UV editing, and now I'm going to go ahead and create a cube. I'm going to scale that up. I'm going to turn this off if it's not already. And then I'm going to set that up on the grid like this. I'm also going to create a cylinder. I'm going to set that up on the grid. And I'm going to create a sphere. Scale that up. And then I'm going to create kind of a crazy shape. Maybe like this platonic solid. Yeah, okay. And, okay, good. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through and I'm going to UV map each one of these. Because I feel like these are the kind of the core fundamental shapes, with the exception of this one, of course. And you're going to see a technique that I'm going to use through all of them. Okay. Now on the cube is such a simple shape. It actually does, it's the only shape that's actually laid out for us. So if I didn't change anything, I'd be fine using this. But I'm going to do this. I'm going to go to UV. I'm just going to do a planar map on the whole thing. And it's going to just kind of crunch it all together and just kind of sew it all back. And I'm just going to move it over here. So that's how I start all these objects. I'm going to do a planar map on the whole thing to kind of sew it all together, to kind of ruin it. Okay, that way I can show you how to do it from scratch. Now, I'm going to go ahead and select this. So if I select this in object mode, I'm going to click on this isolate button. And now I have this cube here by itself. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to UV, and I'm going to go down to this planar map options. And if I reset this, I'm going to make sure I set this to best plane, and then I have both of these checked. The good news is this is all you have to worry about, okay? If you have this set correctly, that is the only thing that I use when I UV map. I don't use any of this other stuff. And I've UV mapped a lot of complex things. And I found that this is the best method. You'll see why in a second. So how I approach really every shape is I think about what is the front, top, side, and bottom. On the cube, it's really easy to see that. So I'm going to go UV planar map, and there you can see that it kind of put a piece of paper, and this is kind of the result, is one side of it. Okay. Now I'm going to go do another side, maybe this side, UV planar, and you can see that it didn't follow the rules. Okay, you can see that it's projecting it from the wrong angle. So let me double check my settings here. Okay, I want to make sure best plane and keep both are checked, and I'll hit apply. And now I can see that it worked properly. I'm going to move that out of the way. Notice that every time it's going to project into this area, and then I have to move it out of the way, otherwise they're going to keep stacking up in that area. Now if I do this one, UV, planar map, excellent. Now it laid flat that way. I'm going to move that out of the way. Go to here, UV, planar map, move that out of the way. And I'm continually doing this until I'm done with the cube. Planar map. And the last one I have left is, I think, is this backside, UV, planar map. Okay, good. So you could say that I have this cube defined as all these different sides of it. Now, the last thing I'm going to do is right click and go to UV shell, drag over all of these, and go to modify layout. And what that's going to do is it's going to stick them all in this quadrant. That's the quadrant that we need them in. It's going to put them as close together, and that we're done with the cube. Okay, great. I'm going to unisolate select, and I'm going to go to the next one here. On this one, I'm going to UV map this the same way that I did, using the same planar projection options. So to kind of screw this up in the beginning, I'm going to select over the whole thing, UV planar map, okay? And then I'm going to consider this kind of my junk pile, and I'm going to move it out of the way. So for this one, I'm going to select the top of it, and then I'm going to control click on the rest of it. I'm going to do a UV planar map. And now you can see once again it took that piece of paper, it cut off the top, and I can move that out of the way. I can do the same for the bottom. I can select the bottom, control click up here, UV planar map. Excellent. Now this last one here, this gets a little bit trickier because once again I'll isolate select this. Because I can't just select this whole thing and do a planar map because it wraps 360 degrees around. So if we imagine that we had like a can of soup or something, and if you think about the label that goes around the can, there has to be a seam somewhere. So let's say if I said this is going to be the seam, and if I cut that, and you'll notice that the lines become thicker on the edge of the shells. That's showing where the seam is. Now if I took this side, I just right clicked, went to UV shell, and then if I go to modify, unfold, it's as if we took that label, we cut it here with a razor blade, and then we literally unfolded it. You could see that that's what that would look like. When I'm done with all that, I could simply select this, go to modify, layout. Great. Now I'm done with the can. If I wanted to clean that up a little bit better, I could kind of move this. There we go. That looks nice. You'll notice that if I select the cube's UVs are there. If I select this, that's there. If I shift select both of them, it's going to show both of their UVs on top of one another. So the UV editor is meant to only show the active object that you have selected. Continuing on here, I'm going to start this like I started all the other ones, is just select the whole thing, do a planar map, and just kind of move this off to the side. Now what? Well, I feel like what I could do here is select the top half of this and do a UV planar map and select the bottom half. Here's kind of a trick. I could select the bottom half like this here because it would be easier to select it. I just right clicked, went to face, drag selected over it, and now I could go UV planar map and then move these away like that. Now you might be thinking, hey, this is great, I'm done, this looks good, but if I turn on the checker right here, the checker indicates how good it is. So if I could read the checker, in other words, the checkers are nice and square, that's good. If the checkers are distorted, that means that that is not acceptable. I can't really use that. And it makes sense because on the top of this, it's very clear. Like let's say this was a globe. I could paint Antarctica up here and then I could start painting some continents, but by the time I get to the edges, it's gonna be very questionable, my painting ability, because how stretched it is here from how it's looking here. So what I can do is if I take this shell and if I go to modify unfold, you can see that it relaxed it. So now it's on the edges. It's not perfect, but it's significantly better. I'll do the same here. I'll go to modify, and as I do this, watch what happens here. Modify, unfold. Yeah, now it's relaxed. Okay, that's looking pretty good. And now we can take all of this, modify, layout. That looks good. So just to recap on these, I used the planar mapping on every single object, okay? And with this setting, best plane, keep image height ratio, and insert projection before deformers, all of that checked, and that's it. And I'm going to show what this actually means now. So let's say if I had a random shape like this, and I'm just going to select the whole thing, planar map the whole thing to get started, okay? And let's say if I wanted to grab some of these really obscure angles, like this one, and do a projection on it, okay? Well, how it's set by default is this. it's set to bounding box and then X, Y, and Z. Okay, so if I tried it now and did a projection, you can see what it's doing is it's projecting it from this angle. Well, that doesn't really make a lot of sense. I mean, that's not a bad one for that shape. Let's try another one. So if I did, let's see what happens if I did Y on this. Okay, that's terrible because it projected it from the top down, which doesn't make a lot of sense. Let's try from the Z. Okay, that's better. That makes some sense, but you can see that it's not still in line with our shape. So that's why I'm suggesting if we do best plane, that's perfect. Okay, so in other words, the computer figures out what the best angle should be. So I have no idea why you would ever want to use anything other than best plane. So if I selected this one and applied, I didn't have to think about the angle that I'm projecting that. It's automatically just doing the correct angle that it should. Now, if you have more than one, let's say these two, it's going to kind of split the difference and give you the best result based on what you have selected. Okay, so you're going to want to have best plane on all times, no matter what you have selected. So I had best plane on for all of these. So when I projected from the top of the sphere, it angled it how it thought it should. And once again, same with all of these. So hopefully that gives you some insight to UV mapping and kind of the power of these. Notice there is cylindrical and spherical mapping. Once again, I don't suggest using those. I suggest using only planar mapping and doing it in the method that I'm showing.